So here I am back with my box cutter. What's left? I need to even this out a bit, figure out what I'm doing with this front edge, and then bring in my bevels, get my ricasso nice and straight, fix this yucky choil, I think is what it's called. So ahead of me is just a bunch of grinding and sanding, which I can finally test my new grinder. I'm going to start off with some 100 grit. I'll probably start off with grinding stone to fix this up, give me some nice square edges here. Grinding stones are garbage, they don't give you a nice finish at all, but they're good at bulk stock removal. Then I'll go to 100 grit belt sander, start removing some material, get a double-edged bevel, and then work my way through the grits. I've got 100, 180, 240, 320. I'd really like to get up to something a bit higher than that. 240 might be fine, because after that, I then have to get my bevels as close as I can to where I want them without going to an actual knife's edge, because then it needs a heat treat. Once it's heat treated and tempered, then I go to the 320 grit, and I would like to have some 400 and 600 grit even on the belt sander, but I don't. So once I've done the 320, it'll be onto hand sanding. It's a lot of sanding. So I might walk you through a few of the steps, but for the most part, I'm going to skip through it because I've got a lot of sanding ahead of me today, maybe even a couple of days worth. I don't know I don't know how much I'm going to get done today. We'll see. Hopefully by the end of this episode, I'll have the heat treat and all the etch done, and then maybe on the next one, sort out a handle. I may have goofed. It's very thin now. That's not so good. And obviously I got it pretty hot. All things I'm still learning. The grinder worked fairly well, but because I was getting too thin, or at least I think I'm too thin, I've ended up with this bloody, I don't know what you call it, bevel, top of the bevel line on one side. It's not on the other. My fear is that if I keep going, I'm going to get this thing too thin. And then when it comes time to heat treat, warp like crazy, and I'm already worried that it's going to do that. So I don't know. I may have to just get this heat treated now, as it is. Oh gosh, that's a little bit scary. It's going to be a heat treat next. I'm worried that I'm going to mess this whole thing up now. I might have already messed it all up. No, I can't do heat treat. Oh, where is the stupid thing? Because of this choil. It's uneven. I'm not happy with it. I might just spend a few minutes on it. I sort of cleaned it up. It'll do. I'm not convinced that this is going to work anymore. I mean, I was never fully convinced it was going to work, but... So my understanding of heat treat is that I need to get this up to... I have to get this up to temp, to critical, what do they call it? Past critical or something like that. At which point it'll lose its magnetism. Then you heat it just a smidge more than that. And then you quench it in some oil. I'll be using canola oil. And my understanding of that as well is that you need to preheat your oil. I'm not entirely sure why, but they say it quenches better with a warm, hot oil. So I'll be trying to heat that up to about 50 degrees Celsius. Then that into the oil, and hopefully we get a successful heat treat.
So what I'm doing here is heating up a piece of steel, which I will then put into the canola oil to bring that up to temp. We're only at about 30 degrees at the moment. Got a little bit too hot that time. Well, I guess I'm letting that cool off a bit. Hopefully, by the time I get the blade up to temp, that will have come down enough, or just right, or whatever. This is how I'll be holding it. I'm going to be heating up just the blade, checking it with this magnet, see if it's still magnetic or not. Yeah. All this black stuff is a good sign, and this file just scoots straight across. I may have done it.
I may have had some success. File just skates straight across, which makes me think that it has been hardened, which means it's fairly brittle right now, so it needs tempering. I don't know really the correct procedure. Different people say different things, but I'm gonna go 200 degrees in my home oven. I'll set it to like 210, 220, because I don't think it's very accurate. Leave it in there for an hour, let it cool down, chuck it back in for another hour, and that should even out the grain structure or something and make it less brittle and yet still hard, which means that when I sharpen it, it'll hold an edge, but should I drop it, it won't shatter to pieces. I don't know if these light and dark patches are indicative of the Damascus pattern, but if they are, I think this thing will look kind of cool. Time will tell. Into the oven. One hour. Yeah. Yeah. So that's temper cycle number 1. I think it may have been successful. From my understanding is you're looking for this light straw color as an indicator. So I'm gonna wait for that to cool off a little bit and then throw it back in for another hour. And temper cycle, wrong button, number 2. 1 more hour. All right, so I think I've had a reasonable amount of success with this thing. I think it's hardened well. I hope it's tempered. I don't really know. But now there is slight concern. It's going to be really hard to show, I think. Just in here, there's a crack, which I think is a continuation from the crack that started down here. It goes all the way up from where forging it together didn't really work. So having 2 pieces side by side and trying to forge weld them together like that, it just doesn't work. So I don't know if that's going to be a major problem or not. We'll find out down the track. But for now, all that's left, not all that's left, what's next is a load of sanding. Lots and lots and lots of sanding. Unfortunately, because of how thin I got it, I couldn't use the belt sander up to a higher grit than 180, I think it was. Yep, 180. So it's now hand sanding time, which I have various types of grit, starting at 240, then 360, then 400, then 600, then 800, then 1200. I might even have some 1500, but I don't know. So now it's just a ridiculous amount of sanding. Where have I put the thing? It's this camouflage color. I couldn't see it. I'll be sanding it with a 240 grit, I think all in one direction. Then up to the next grit and you go the opposite direction. That way you can see where you've sanded and where still needs to be sanded. And the scratches will get finer and finer and finer until basically they're gone. Oh, so I'm gonna start that. It's December 22nd today. A couple of days out from Christmas, which is our second busiest time of year at work. So it's long days and lots of hard work. Production's increased like 3 times. So I think sanding is probably a good task for today. Nothing too strenuous. So I've taken this to 240. Fairly poorly. I've got good spots, I've got bad spots. Here you can still see where it's like, it's not flat, so I've got 2 different angles going on here. Whatever. That's an hour and a quarter of sanding at 240. I haven't bothered to do through here properly because all from this point back is going to be hidden by the tang anyway. So I just got a bulk of the black crud off. I have noticed a couple of issues. Let's see if I can... There. Just here. That line is the crack from where the pieces join together. So that's a poo-poo way of forging. So the hole that started here does indeed run up through here. You can see there's 2 holes in the top there where the forge, I think, was a bit unsuccessful. I don't think it should be too much of an issue. But that's an hour of sanding at just 240 grit. I still got all the others to go. So I'm gonna get cracking and I'll get back to you when I'm finished. Don't know if it looks much different, but that's 360 grit. Now it's up to 600, 400, 500. I don't know, next grit up. So there it is, 400 grit, sort of. It's probably not a very good job. I think most people would go to 600, but I've been at this for nearly 3 hours now. That was a long and arduous process. I've taken it up to 400 grit. I don't know how well I've done it. I really wish that I hadn't ground it so thin on the belt sander so that I could have at least taken it up to a higher grip mechanically rather than by hand, because that was a long task. And honestly, I don't know how good of a job I've done. So I noticed after doing that, the cracks that I showed before, my plunge line and ricasso is this weird double thing where my sanding belt sort of flopped over itself and whatnot, moved around. Other than that though, I think it's okay. Goodness, I'm tired. But now is the exciting part, I think. I don't know if I'm meant to sharpen it first. Nah, we'll do the fun stuff first. Ferric chloride, which is an acid for those that do not know. And what it does is it etches the steel. It etches the 2 types of steel. I do not know how to go about this. I don't want to put the whole thing in. I really just want the blade to go in. Or the whole thing. That was less than ideal. So the issue with me doing that just now means that it's resting on the bottom, which prevents the ferric chloride actually getting the entire way around. I think this is going to look pretty cool. I'm going to give this a rinse off. Now I really just want the blade hanging in. How am I going to do this, eh? Well, I could leave it like that. Alright, since I'm stupid, I'm just going to leave it like that for a little while. I've read many different ways of etching your steel, and I don't know what's correct. So I'm just gonna take this out now, give it a quick rinse in water, then drop it in a bicarb heavy solution. It's been sitting in there for 20 minutes now. As you can see, it looks pretty good. So now the bicarb heavy solution here apparently neutralizes the acid, stops it from etching further. Jeez. That's a lot of stuff coming off there. I don't know about you, but I think it worked. Pretty happy with that, considering it's just a bunch of different pieces smashed together. I think it's worked out pretty cool. So now I need to put a guard on, a handle, and sharpen it. So there's a few issues. As I've pointed out, the hole that started off here did in fact go from the bottom to the top, but I think the rest of it was forge welded together for it to not be too much of an issue. I don't think it's going to compromise the blade as far as I'm concerned. It's certainly not something that I would give to someone else and tell them that it's perfect or whatever. But for what I'm going to use it for, which is not much, I think it's worked out fine. So for now, that's it. In the next video, I'll be tackling the handle. As for now, I'm going to get some sleep.